Welcome to the IFTA Screen Discussion Series, putting focus on each of the feature films submitting to this year's IFTA Awards. In the coming weeks, we'll be putting the spotlight on a variety of exquisite projects representing the best of Irish filmmaking. And today I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by the filmmakers behind It Is In Us All. This movie made its Irish premiere at the Galway Film Fleadh last summer. It was released here last September, and it's now in consideration for a number of categories at the 2023 IFTA Awards. This is Antonia Campbell-Hugh's feature debut as a writer and director, and we're absolutely delighted to be joined by her today, along with producers Emma Foley, Tamron Reinecke, also the director of photography, Piers McGrail, production designer John Leslie, and actor Rhys Mannion. Welcome, everyone, and congratulations on the movie, firstly. Antonia, I'd love to start with you, actually, because, you know, this was such a feat to take on. You directed it, you wrote it, you also co-starred in this movie. I'd like to look at the acting, first of all. I'd like to look at the writing, first of all, because I'm curious of where did the story for It Is In Us All, where did the story actually come from?
It's kind of an amalgamation of things. So when I was first presented with the fund, POV, which is like a women's fund, there was actually a very small time window, because I was told about it quite late in the game of when your applications had to come through. So I had to turn something around quite quickly. And there's certain areas, concepts and ideologies and various things that I've always been quite interested in. And one of them always was trying to observe and give platform to the male. And I did question whether I could do that with a women's fund, but also it had to be set in Ireland. And I've been looking at Ireland and my connection with where I come from and the place where I was born, and that feeling of nationalism and identity and all these various subjects and how it relates to me. So it seemed like perfect platform for that. And I had been spending quite a lot of time traveling to Donegal, where I was born, and getting to know it again, become reacquainted, because I was born in Donegal, but we left when I was 3. And it was in the kind of that 5-year window around before when I made the film, and I started to really reconnect. And there was this constant thing that was happening with, kids driving cars and crashing and all that. But what really struck me about that was the inherent sense of community and tribalism and vitality versus men that I saw in more affluent cities. So the story kind of hung together from all of those.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of those roots, is that where the title of the movie actually came from? Because it's very unique.
Yeah, it's a tongue twister, as we've established. I can't say it, so I'm not going to. But yeah, no, basically, I wanted it to be kind of a difficult sentence to articulate so that people actually think about what it means. And yeah, that basically that what is in us all is kind of, it is something you can't quite articulate. That is that really true connectivity with being alive. And that's what I wanted to explore.
Yeah, and you do it so beautifully. You really didn't give yourself an easy task either, because aside from writing and directing, your acting role in the film is quite a hefty one. She's the grieving mother, and the way I interpreted the movie anyway, in many ways she's kind of the representation of the truth. She is the one expressing this grief that the characters around her don't seem to be able to express. Can you tell me a bit about taking on that role and balancing it with directing at the same time?
Yeah. So at first, I think in the very first pass of the script, she maybe wasn't there initially. I think when I first wrote, maybe it was a treatment, there were no females at all. I was being quite bold and contrary. And but then obviously when I had to cave and put a female voice in, it is specifically that. It was kind of like the voice of conscientiousness, the voice of the audience, the voice of reason. And she was written very specifically to just kind of hop in and do that service and kind of bring us back to a base level of zero, where we do realize that there is a moral compass, etc. And I thought, because it was written quite specifically and sparsely that she comes in, that I could handle that. It was harder than I expected. Only because, I mean, I guess I had just done something where I worked with a woman who was the director and lead of a film, and I watched how she had managed it, and they had very much accounted for the time it takes to have to run back and forth behind the monitor and check things. And I thought, because this was going to be just a few scenes, it would be quite easy to do. But, you know, on such a low budget, you're always racing against the clock. So I would, if I was ever to do it again, I'd very much build it into the schedule, the time that it takes.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, you have assembled an absolutely incredible cast for this, and among them is Rhys Mannion. So Rhys, I was hoping to turn to you next. Your character of Evan, he was so fascinating to watch. He's sinister, he's suspicious, he's so intense. How do you go about preparing for a role like that?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think it definitely read in a certain way, and it was like, when I watch it, each time I watch the film, I think I always take something completely new from it, and I see it in a different way. But I think a lot of that was, yeah, it was definitely Antonia's direction of I think stripping it back and keeping it, like, Evan's character, I think, very simple, and then I guess contrasting to different things. You know, I think if I have one intention, it can read in 1,000 different ways compared to Cosmo's, you know, the whole journey that he goes on through the whole film. But yeah, no, it was a lot of fun, and Antonia's direction definitely, you know, brought it all to light and made it really, really great.
Well, can I just say, I found Rhys's first audition tape the other day.
Oh, really? Oh, no.
And I know, but it's stunning. I mean, it really is. And I met so many young men, and it's funny because being an actor as well, I have to, you know, it's interesting to see this process. And sometimes when you're casting certain roles, you're looking for a face or an energy. And sometimes you just need the actor to really hit these very complex beats. And it's so hard to define. And the character of Evan was really quite complex, because he has this really beautiful sense of, he's like an angelic, almost otherworldly essence about him that's also quite seductive and also menacing, all kind of combined into one. And Rhys just managed to do it in his first tape, and then he just continued to kind of become more complex and nuanced. So back to you, Rhys.
She's being very kind.
No, it's true. I mean, it's really fascinating. So
yeah, I guess that kind of sums that. I don't really have much to add on that, but thank you.
And you touched on Cosmo there, and I was wondering about working opposite him, because you know, that relationship in the film, there's such a level of intensity to it, and really your chemistry on screen is terrific. So how did you find performing opposite him and kind of developing that rapport and chemistry?
Oh yeah, I think I luckily decided to not watch Calm with Horses, because that had just come out kind of before we started filming, and I luckily decided not to watch that before I met Cosmo, because he was fantastic in it, but I'm pretty sure I would have been a little bit, you know, starstruck had I approached him after watching that. So I guess that ignorance is bliss in a certain way of it was just great. We you know, I think with COVID as well, we were for him, we were trapped together. So we just kind of got to know each other very well, and it was just the two of us a lot of the times on certain days, and you know, for better or worse, you start to know each other's habits really well, and I think that just played really nicely in the film. And yeah, no, he was fantastic to work with, though. He was really taught me a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And anyone can feel free to like pitch in here, but it is just amazing when I heard before we kind of started recording here, you guys all have like such a rapport with each other, just like bouncing off one another, just having the chats and catching up and everything. It's interesting because it's such a like, it's such a tense and also quite sad movie at parts, but did you get that kind of downtime and to just kind of get to know one another as well?
No. I think we're all just working so much. It was just quite but wasn't it? It was
pretty full on.
It was really full on. I mean, we were battling against everything. So it just never felt like there was a break. I mean, Emma and Tamron, you can speak about that, I suppose. It was, and Pierce was having to drive back to Dublin like 5 hours after shooting most like every Friday night. So it was we were up against everything. But I think that's what brings you together as well, doesn't it? When you're all like fighting to keep this ship going.
Yeah, and I would say it wasn't like a totally panicked shoot either, though. I think for the scale of the budget and everything, actually, it was quite well scheduled. It was quite like a good schedule for that scale of budget. And I know like a lot of days we kind of finished a little early, and it was intense at times, but it was also kind of, I think we were lucky with the time that we had on that scale.
I think the level of intensity was also very tied to the context of the shoot, which was like level 5 lockdown, COVID, very rural Donegal. So whilst we had the time, as Pierce said, the budget was tight, and it could have been a lot more chaotic than it probably was from a shooting perspective. But everybody was just so on their A game that side of things went well. It was the sense of closeness that you get when you're stuck in a bubble, quite literally, because you're all cocooning together during this period of filming. And so everyone, I think, got to know each other on a sort of different level because of that. And then there was, I mean, Pierce and John had a really, really tough task of bringing the film that you see, which is a hugely elevated, art house project with a very limited budget, and they did that incredibly well. So it was all of those things together.
Yeah, I think Pierce would probably agree that he and we did that just purely because we kept kind of in touch really all the time. Although I wasn't necessarily on the every day that they were shooting. I was in the studio building the sound or something. But we had amusing time playing guitars and stuff in the evenings. That kind of
we had some downtime.
When we got a chance, which actually was not that often, was it?
I think it was the last couple of days. Yeah,
it was actually, because we were it was pretty full on throughout.
Yeah, I mean, well, I've always
kind of hot house atmosphere, which is interesting as well.
Like I've throughout my career, I've just always really I really value collaborations that continue through your career. You get to know each other, and you can grow and elevate and progress and be more ambitious through those long-term collaborations. And I've known Pierce and John for a very long time, and so I began, for me, the overall visual and aesthetic and tonality that is established throughout the film was very important. And Pierce and I and John started those discussions very early on to me.
Yeah, I might actually bring it to you next, Pierce, because I did think your cinematography was so key to this movie, to capturing that ambience of, disillusionment and grief. And you were kind of working with, both some characters that were reflecting that, and also, the backdrop of Donegal. So can you tell me a bit about that process and, collaborating with John and Antonia and the rest of the cast and crew as well?
Yeah, well, I suppose it did. I don't know how early it started, but it started quite a long time before the shoot, Antonia, that we would have first talked about it, I guess. But there wasn't that much prep time at the same time. So the lead into the shoot, which usually you get kind of, on a bigger shoot, you might get a month or a month and a half, I think was probably only a couple of weeks. I don't quite remember, but we certainly talked about it prior to that, and we would have talked about the script. And Antonia you're not particularly kind of someone to reference other films, or she's much more kind of I suppose just talking about it and trying to find something new and just trying to find the truth of that particular script. So it's an interesting process. And I know a couple of directors that work like that, and I find it quite successful. And I think that intuitive kind of way of finding a visual style for a film is I think you end up with something a little more unique than if you go into it saying I want it to look like this other film, or if you pull lots of different references. So it was a nice process in that regard.
I mean, I think I referenced a lot of photography. Like I know for this, there was some like Danish painters, and there was like Martina Huglands and Rinko Kawauchi, and then some of even anyway. But that was mainly I tend to not.
You knew what you didn't want it to be as well, which is always useful. So
Yeah.
you didn't want it to be. So I know, and we had worked together. So there was I think that you just every film you do with someone, you build a layer of kind of trust and confidence to that you end up not having to resort to kind of references, and you kind of just find it as you go in a way. And we weren't trying anything too sophisticated. I mean, I always felt it was quite the landscapes don't require a lot, that part of the world, and that I don't think you need to overshoot them for them to have a huge amount of impact. So I would say it was quite a simple shooting style, and quite restrained and composed, which we ended up doing.
Yeah, that's interesting you touched on that, because John, I was actually wondering about that for you as like production designer, when you're working with a lot of kind of natural landscapes. How does your role as production designer kind of fit into all that, and how do you kind of work with this absolutely stunning landscape of Donegal?
I think the thing is, really Pierce and sorry, feed in definitely into what I was trying to do in the studio sets, which we had quite a few in one particular place. How to get the feel of the exterior. Yes, of course, is so masterly at the way he shoots and how his cinematography in general, that I was really taking a big lead from him, and also from Antonia's course of really the two of them. So in a way, I was just kind of trying to catch up. But I was definitely trying to make the insides that we did, which was my main area of concern with this one, because the exteriors were, really already that brilliant, wonderful.
It was a big decision early on.
Yeah.
There's a big decision early on to shoot the interiors as a set. Which wasn't always the case. I think I don't know.
There was a long discussion with Tamara and Emma about there was a time when I was pushing to do the whole thing in studio. Do you remember there was that whole debate of whether we could actually do the driving in a studio space, and that was kind of like that was going to be a big decision. We were trying to cost it, and then was that? I mean, I think even those discussions happened before COVID. I'm not sure, but anyway, and then it became much more into play when we were in a kind of lockdown COVID situation, but instead we kept the car outside, and a real car somewhat. And but having a set build, we found this amazing community center in Dunlow. We were able to take over everything and build the set inside that. And I think that gave us great kind of visual control. Would you not say?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think on top of that, it's such a privilege to have John, because he brings incredible value to his set. I think most production designers trying to work with that scale of budget could not have done what John did, because I mean there's a lot of it was a house, and it was the abattoir and the hospital,
so
a lot of scenes, a lot of locations that we managed to shoot in this relatively small space in the hall. And certainly John, I think it's a real it was very impressive what you did there for I imagine not a huge amount. And not much, a small crew, and
Penny's small crew. Yeah, no, it's always a challenge. No, it's I was I was. It turned out rather well using that place for we did 7 sets, I think, an hour, something like fantastic. That. And but it gave me a chance actually to really manipulate the walls. It sounds probably you don't really see it that much in a way, but I was very keen to kind of texture them and in that kind of, so particularly because I wanted them to feel a little bit like those was it Swedish paintings or whatever it was that we were looking at, Antonia, in a way. So I just started from that sort of idea to make it feel, I thought, a little bit painterly anyway, all over the walls. And so that was interesting, and I think it worked, and I think it helped to keep that kind of slightly fresh kind of. I felt like it slightly felt like the exterior in the interior, and maybe that's a really odd thing to say, but to me anyway, that's what I was trying to aim at, was that I was getting some of that dampness, some of the sort of the sort of mist and stuff, and all the stuff that we see over the Donegal Hills inside as well.
And it was, I mean, because very much what was I was trying to establish with the film, and I think throughout, is to have a sort of otherworldliness that isn't specifically recognizable as what we know to be Ireland on screen, and to kind of have it, to have the film have a placelessness, and then therefore a feeling of alienation, and so you're with the character and his experience of the land. And that's why I kept always comparing it to sci-fi, which people always balked at, but that was the intent. And but the house itself as well, we recognize the house as, you know, the exterior of the house is one that we found, and that's actually what brought us to Dunlow, that location, because it is an old famine house that had been recently repainted, so it looks quite Nordic and not what we'd recognize as a typical Irish house. And then trying to bring that handsomeness to the interior as well, which is, you know, again, it's quite Scandinavian, I suppose, in its texture. So all those things were very important from production design and visual.
Yeah, absolutely. And you really like do not only see it, but you feel it. Like there's this consistent kind of, I don't know, like a coldness to the environment. Like it doesn't really feel like home, but at the same time, it's somewhere you're kind of, it's a world you're kind of fascinated by it and drawn into regardless, if that kind of makes sense. So it's really well done.
Thank you. But I think it's like coming back to like Reese, I think what's interesting is because what I really wanted to show the warmth is in the people, you know, that's where they contrast, and they're also unique, and they have drop in and send messages, but the group of boys and Reese's characters, they are the heart and soul, and they're these like almost like fallen angels of the community with such, you know, full hearts and kind of an interesting way of delivering their message. So it's the contrast of that.
Yeah, and there's kind of a vulnerability there as well. Like you want to protect them, which I suppose is what the lead kind of feels and everything. I'd love to bring in the producers at this point, Emma Tamrin and Connor, because I'm really interested in what it takes for a producer to kind of take on a director when they're doing his or her, you know, feature debut, because I suppose there is kind of a sort of risk involved in that. There's kind of a tendency for, you know, the resources to kind of go to those, like, you know, tried and tested names. So I'm just curious, although to be honest, having spoken with you, Antonia, extensively, you've such a like distinct vision that I'm like, I would give you a movie. But I was wondering.
Sorry, I shouldn't.
Oh, sorry.
Well, it's just, I mean, I'm going to shut up in a second, I promise. But it's just, I always felt that first, just because I've been in this industry for so long, like people do not really understand that, you know, if you've been on sets for 18 years, you do learn a thing or two, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can hear it in how you speak about filmmaking. It's absolutely extraordinary. What was it that made each of you guys, Emma, Tamrin and Connor, really want to jump on board of It Is in Us All? Was it the script? Was it meeting Antonia? And what other kind of factors came into that decision?
Connor actually isn't here. He was supposed to be here, but he's not here. But Connor and Antonia worked together on the development of the script originally. So that was the original team. And then later down the line, when it got closer to production, myself and Tamrin were brought in because we'd made another film on very little money, and I think that they thought that would be helpful for making this. And we read the script, and like immediately I think the two of us were just like, oh, this is just so beautifully well written, and it didn't read like a traditional script at all. And yeah, and then we met Antonia, and Antonia just has such and always had real clarity of vision. It was just, she just knew what she wanted and was capable of communicating it in a very eloquent way. And I remember one day when she told us, she that she loved the film Alien, and we started talking more about sci-fi films. I feel like we got more of an understanding of who she is as a filmmaker and what she aspires to be, and what she wanted to do with this film. So it was a combination too. It's just so well written, and then Antonia is such a force that it was kind of exciting to see how we'd all try to pull it off, really, because it was pretty ambitious.
I'm 100% behind everything Emma said.
And then also the team was really exciting as well, because Piers and John were before us, and so that was all really exciting to get to work with people who'd had that level of experience in the industry. It was really exciting for us, because it was only our second film. Connor's really experienced, so there was a lovely balance, I think, overall on the film, for all crew of that, like really experienced being coupled with less experienced. And
yeah,
so
it's part of the POV scheme, so it really was an opportunity for people to level up. And so we had really experienced HODs, and then even myself and Emma, this would have been a really big step up for us. And I think that's helpful sometimes, because having maybe producers who are a little bit more naive in some ways about certain things means we're more willing to try, more willing to like put our hand to something or say yes to something and then figure out later on. Like now, sometimes I look back on the budget we gave you, John Leslie, and I shudder to think we asked you to build anything.
So do I. I still have nightmares about it.
And it's such a credit to Tamara and Emma, because the thing is, I mean, across the board, no matter who read the script, they said there's no way you're going to be able to make this for that budget. Like that was the constant words that I was being told. And then people, as you say, people having doubts if you've never made a film before, and I'd keep saying, I know what I'm doing. I mean, I do believe this, like so many first-time filmmakers are given much bigger budgets, and they've never been on a set before. And I really believe in graft and learning what, as you progress, and not being able to just jump in the deep end willy-nilly. Like I think money should be allocated to people who know what to do with it. But it was a very tight budget. And so there was a lot of trust from everybody involved, and they really worked far beyond their pay.
As did everybody.
Like across the board, yeah.
How long did, I'm just curious about, from like kind of the inception of the script to actually how long it took, what kind of like timeline was that? I'm just kind of curious.
I think it was, so 2017 is when I think I first applied, and then I think we were meant to shoot originally in June 2020, so it was starting like, so it's 2.5 years, I guess, something like that. 3 years.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously there was a slight delay because of COVID, but not enormous.
It was amazing though that you got it made in COVID. Like, oh my gosh, it's just been such a like crazy time for so many industries, but particularly for anyone to get movies done in that time is absolutely incredible. I suppose I had kind of a general question for everyone, so whoever wants to, feel free to jump in. You've kind of talked about making the film in COVID, and the intensity and working with this limited budget, which is all incredibly impressive. I'm curious about like what kind of things happened that all came out exactly as planned and you were amazed, and then what were some of the surprises that occurred during the production? Like, was there anything that you just kind of had to wing and it came out even better than expected?
Shall I speak? But there was some just very just great resourcefulness. Like we were very stuck on how to make car crashes work. That was a major challenge. I mean, we seem to be cursed in car department. cars whose engines don't work, cars without engines, etc. But things like the car, John Leslie and Pierce kind of masterminded this amazing, in the film, you see the car, after the crash, you see the car roll down the hill, and that's like, John, that jump in, it's a barrel. What kind of barrel is it?
It's a barrel that I feed my sheep silage with. So you put silage in, and we attached the headlights to that. And then we did various experiments to try to see how it down the hill at the farm in the middle of the night. And,
but it's so beautiful.
Managed to get it to work. So.
Poor Pierce, you never quite got the hill you wanted.
Yeah, I wanted to be cheaper, but it worked out well.
I know.
But I do
kind of,
think
isn't that's just part of making a film, isn't it? And I think the fact that we were able to shoot that further down the line, I don't know how you worked that within your budget or didn't, or whatever happened there, but I think that that flexibility is really important. And I think, again, I think a different production of this scale might not have had the feasibility to do that. So we looked at it and we thought, it isn't working. Can we add something onto it as a pickup? And we were able to do those pickups, and it was really useful. But
don't you think, because there was always the kind of like across the board decision and feeling to not go for things that maybe other bigger budget productions would, or lower budget, but just like no drones, no going to the easy direction of using VFX, like trying to have everything in camera. And it just, you really feel it. I think the payoff, it's a much higher reward of a payoff in the end. In the same way
sorry, go on.
So I was just going to say, the same way that the nightclub scene is shot.
Yeah, that
actually, that was something that worked out really well. Just like as a COVID kind of consequence of COVID was, remember, we sort of thought we have to do this pass on the script that's going to help us keep numbers down for certain scenes because we couldn't have too many extras. And in the end, it was as if the script was always meant exactly as it is. Like, nobody in the dance scene, very few people in the church. I don't think you watch it and think, I think it worked really, really well. And when we read the script after you'd done that pass, I remember we were like, it's perfect. There's no feeling of compromise here, It was one of those kind of things that just worked out really, really well and worked in favor, I think, of the narrative.
Yes.
For you, Reese, actually, as an actor, were there any kind of, spontaneous or, freestyle moments that came into your performance that ended up kind of making their way into the final film?
One scene that just kind of hits me is not necessarily that anything kind of was very different to how I think it read on script, but maybe it just wasn't in it that day. Like it was a scene where Cosmo kind of he slams on the brakes after losing control a little bit, and just yells, and I just remember the first take, they say action, he just went, and I was, oh, okay, we're in a scene now. It just kind of snapped, and that one definitely he thrusted me into the kind of the scene and into the world. So that definitely that kind of just reigns in my mind. I don't think it was actually, I think it was exactly how it was supposed to be, and he did a fantastic job of it. It just like I just woke up was that feeling.
So that's genuine Reese surprise for you.
Oh, that was such Reese surprise. I forgot my lines. The first few lines just went out of my head. It was just, oh, okay. But no, it was really great.
Brilliant. Another general question I kind of had for everyone. It is in us all. It's had a number of showings at this point. It showed in Galway. It screened in South by Southwest. It had kind of a general cinema release in Ireland and the UK. What have been some of the reactions that each of you have heard to the film, whether it was from audience members or family and friends that you've shown it to, reactions that really kind of struck you and stuck with you?
Should I speak? I think for all of us, its world premiere was at South by, and because it had been kind of like a quiet post journey, you know, because it was still COVID, so you wouldn't have screenings or anything. And I'd been at South by before, and I was kind of curious that that's where it was going to premiere, because it didn't seem like the obvious fit. So I really had no idea what to expect. You know, there was obvious festivals I saw fitting in more naturally, like South by isn't very European cinema, and this is, I think. And Tamara and Em would know how anxious I was about, you know, its reception, mainly from reviews. You know, that's where the voice comes from. That's where you hear. And that evening was quite extraordinary, you know, just because the critic responses were so understanding of what I was trying to achieve, because it's quite a complex message. And I was even struck by how fully, how articulate and considered and intelligent their understanding was. And that was everything for me.
Someone called it a very handsome film, Antonia. I remember thinking that was really apt. Who was that? Someone said it.
Oh, that was John Walters, our editor.
I thought that was pretty good.
But people really understood the way I was trying to give platform and observe male and masculinity, and not, like I always said, it's not about it's not about toxic masculinity. That's a very kind of like there's such negativity to that, and it's very much about giving platform and introversion to it. And I think that was picked up in the first reviews, and that was very important.
I mean, one of the things that kind of struck me watching it was, and maybe it's like from my own interpretation, because I work for independent.ie, but you hear about, you know, car crashes and road accidents almost on like a daily basis, and there's kind of this fascination with them or something, even though there's kind of a lot of morbidity there. And, you know, it's not in kind of a cynical way, I suppose, like it always makes people very sad, but in a way, like maybe it's a very, you know, Irish phenomenon as well as a global phenomenon. So I was wondering if that was kind of, you know, part of your thinking behind it, Antonia, and was that something that kind of struck you as part of the story as well? Because yeah, and I do find the masculinity element of it really quite interesting as well. You know, even the fact that you have a fully like grown man here, and some young boys too. And it's interesting, there have been kind of queer interpretations of the film as well. So I don't know if that's a question or more an observation, but again, there's just so many layers to work through, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I think even when we were filming, somebody in the crew came up to me and said, you know, that she really appreciated working on it because it was obviously a film about suicide. And I was like, no, it's not. But people do, you know, that's what is, I think, I don't like the word opaque because it just seems so, you know, don't know what you're doing. But I feel that if you build characters that don't have handles on for people to easily grab onto, you do as an audience member have to put the work in. And I think the payoff is much bigger because you have to invest in your leading characters who I suppose, you know, there's an obscure message that's being sold, but ultimately people can take away something slightly different. I know exactly, like I was very much trying to give highlight to people who have like an inherent fatalism, which you could be seen as a suicidal ideation, but it's without drive. It just means that effectively when he comes to the point in the film of does he swerve or not, we know his answer, but he goes on a journey to find that, and then he becomes there's a serenity he like finds through his experience with these young people who are so full of vitality and so full of electricity. He observes life and then falls fully serene. So now I'm just making an observation also and not really answering your observation, but so many people kind of took away various things from it. And I found that, you know, because obviously when the film played in Ireland, people then immediately connect it to their sense of being Irish. And so they pull it back into the land and the people they know and the communities in Ireland. And that's when it became much more focused on the car crashes that were happening and things like that. But in terms of an international audience, those audiences then therefore took away something different, if you understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That was a really good answer to my not very articulate question. Yeah, I was wondering, actually, I'd like to put that out to everyone, like for each of you, what was kind of, you know, the standout, you know, theme or message behind this film, something that really kind of stuck with you both, you know, maybe it was something at the script stage, maybe it was something during the production, or maybe it was something that kind of, you know, resonated with you when you saw the final film.
I think the core relationship was the thing from script right through to the whole way. That was the hook for me, and the thing that I would like, I guess, delve over the most. And I liked that Antonia didn't answer any questions, maybe more so pose them, and people could kind of draw their own conclusions, or I don't know, open up their minds a little bit more to varying degree types of dynamics and relationships that can form, especially complicated ones, ones with an age difference, ones of the same gender, all of that. So yeah, for me it was that.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, Emma. But it's funny how people really do need they need boxes. It's like, I suppose that's why it's called It Is in Us All, because, you know, that is specifically a title without a box. And people get there's like such a taboo for such simple things where you don't have a branding or something that isn't easily kind of given a gender, or you know, if you keep it vague, people then get so like their feathers get all ruffled and anxious. And from the beginning, there was always this question of what is the relationship between Evan and Hamish? And I'm like, yes, it is. There is a sensuality, like throughout the film, that is there. It's not meant to be ignored. It's meant to be very present. And it shouldn't have to necessarily be a homosexual relationship or a non-homosexual relationship, because it is sensual. And I think that didn't need to have a gender conformity, if you will, because I think it is real in the world that we live in, but it's like this sort of slightly taboo area that makes people nervous for no known reason. Like, it is consensual, they're adults. It's just because it doesn't have a title. And so, you know, our American distributor is an LGBTQ distribution, and they very much need it to be a piece of gay cinema. I'm like, well, that's a box. You know, why can't it be within that LGBTQ context without such a specific box? But we seem to need that. But thanks. So Emma was great to say that, because it's specifically that relationship is about that. It's about people connecting on such a human and electrified platform and place that is where they're thrust together through a very traumatic event, that they are basically both raw.
Beautiful. I suppose then I think we have time for one more question. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of a funny one, because I'm like, having like spoken about this movie for so long, I'm like, do you want audiences to take something away from it, or to just come away with that kind of ambiguity or their own interpretation? But is there something in particular you'd like audiences to take away? Because there are so many potential takeaways from It Is in Us All.
Yeah, shall I? I mean, I think the takeaway is that there is the potential for absolute vitality, like beauty, euphoria, heart surge in everyone. I mean, that's what It Is in Us All. Like, I find the film triumphant in its ending, you know, and that's what I think. It's so easy for people to re-access something that they've lost touch with in the most simplest of endeavors, that is part in land. And, you know, it's about bone and flesh and land. And that's why that scene with the arm reset is so important. And that's what I feel the takeaway is, you know, if you can just clear out the mess and get down to the grizzle of your heart. Now I'm just sounding like a really like middle school poet, but you know what I mean.
Beautiful. Anyone else? Any few final words?
I honestly think it was just fun seeing it the different times and especially in the Galway, because I had a lot of friends and family that would go, and they all came out just saying it, like, I think the coolest expression was that it was just like poetry, you know, because it just each individual, like some people walked out thinking, you know, okay, this obviously is about two, you know, it is a homosexual kind of connection. Some people walked out and took it the exact same way, you know, and Tony, like, I guess described it just there, and how I felt kind of, you know, acting in it, where it didn't necessarily feel like a homosexual, but it did feel sensual, and it did feel like there was kind of some otherworldly connection between us. It's just, I think my favorite thing is having people watch it and just seeing, okay, where are they going to go with this? You know, like where did this kind of affect them? That's my favorite thing. That's all.
Okay, well, we might leave it there then. This has been such a fascinating conversation. Thank you all so much for joining me today, and congratulations on the movie again. It's a stunning piece of work.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
for having
much.
us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see everyone.
Bye.
See you guys. Bye.